Hi, I'm Sarah Pearson, and welcome to the Uncomfortable Conversation podcast, where we talk about all of the uncomfortable things that help prevent and respond to sexual violence. I am really excited to be joined today by David Martinez. Thank you for joining us, David.
Thank you.
And we are going to dive in. So I would love to why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, sort of what are the different identities and perspectives that you are bringing into this conversation? I know you're a dad, you're a worker. Tell us a little bit.
Yeah, no, I feel like the coolest thing about me is that I'm a dad, but I also have been someone who's worked in education and as a educator, school administrator, and now doing programming in public schools. So
You say that the coolest thing about you is that you're a dad. That is because your child is 3.
That's because my child is 3.
I am no longer a cool mom because I have an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old.
Okay, that's
so fair. Yeah. So just like you should ride the cool wave as long as you possibly can.
I think I'm going to. He's great for like photo shoots, and Spider-Man is big, so I can pretend to be Spider-Man often, which is fun.
I love it. So you've got some education, you've got some life experience as a dad. And so I think, and we also talked a little bit about you are recently divorced.
Yes, that is true.
And that, kind of having, I'm less recently divorced, but I think sort of one of the things that came up for me in my divorce was just the importance of friends in your life.
Definitely.
And so I would love to start because I've been really interested in male friendship.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about the number of female friends you have versus the number of male friends. And so I would love to start with sort of tell me about a new male friend that you've made since your divorce.
Yeah. So, friendship is important, right? Friendship is huge. I think for me, a new male friend, I had met a friend through one of my good friends from undergrad, and
was it a
male friend?
You met a male friend through a male friend.
Male friend through a male friend.
Okay.
Many years ago, he came to the area to start. He's a college professor, so he came to the area to start professing collegely, and so it was a sort of little by little we became friends. It was like, let's have our kids play together, and our kids are playing together. And
how did it start though? Very first. So it was you have a friend, and then he says, "Hey, my friend moved to Boston."
Yes. So
and then you said.
Yeah, so we had originally met and it was 2017. I first met the person.
You all went and hung out.
We hung out. It was oh, good time. I find out he's coming to be a professor, and so I'm let's I live in Boston. Let me help you transition to Boston. Okay. And so connected again through my friend.
So you said let's go on a friend date, or how did this
go? It was
my
friend was hey, talk to this person. You guys should connect because David is from Boston.
Did you connect on text?
So text, and then we met in person, and we talked a lot through text. Hey, where's a good place to live? Where should I be?
So you gave him some good advice.
I gave him good advice.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
So it started with advice.
Yes.
I have noticed there's some themes on this, right? So it's there's something practical.
Yep.
That's happening.
Yep.
So advice. I might give you advice on your bench press. Okay, so you give some advice.
Give some advice, very practical, and eventually I'm hey, let's get together. So I visit his house, then I bring my kids.
Do you feel nervous? When it was when it was time, it was hey, you want to bring your kid over to my house?
I'm really sociable.
I would have felt
not
nervous.
Really. But it's it's always.
I don't know. Let's meet in a neutral place, like a playground.
Yeah, I guess that could have been.
You went right to his house.
I went right to his house.
Okay.
I think a play date may have been the playground.
Did he have snacks ready for you when you got there?
I think there were goldfish. There were plenty of goldfish, for
sure. Again, trying to understand the norms here.
Yeah. So plenty of goldfish. We talked, pretty practical. We eventually did a kid play date. So him, his wife, and the kids. We did a playground date.
Okay.
That happened too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when did you decide that he was your friend? Have you decided that he is your friend?
I think I've decided. I decided. Okay. It was we would hang out. The kids are playing in the living room, and we would just start talking about some things. It started with we both had very interesting faith journeys, right?
Okay.
And so it was you went to religious school? I went to a religious school. You did that? I was oh, okay. And then I was navigating dating, and I was hey, I'm talking to this person, and it. Everyone
loves to have a friend that's navigating dating, especially the married ones, right?
Yes. Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. So we met as like my marriage was like sort of like dissipating, and we were like, yeah, this isn't working out. And so that friendship was, in and through that
So you
process.
also were going through a hard thing
Yeah.
while you were spending time together.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then
Yeah.
he,
Yeah.
and it didn't seem to scare him off.
No, no,
Right.
no, no.
All right.
Yeah.
So, but now you officially consider him your friend. And so, like, what does
He's my
that
friend.
mean? So, does that mean you talk about your feelings with him?
It does now. What I found is I was thinking about this question, and I was thinking back to like my like early like first conversations, and I remember when I was like a middle schooler, and I found myself. It was just we just moved to Florida. I was like 11 years old, and at the time, my dad was staying in Boston to work while we were in Florida. I'm the middle child of older brother, younger sister, and I remember just like I didn't know the feeling then, but I was like I feel kind of lonely. Like, but again, 11 years old, didn't quite have the language for that. But I found myself like connecting with girls at the time, right, and wanting to like talk on the phone. So whenever I had like the Nextel 9 p.m. or weekends, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm using my free minutes and I'm getting on
And
a
you're
phone
talking
call.
to girls.
And so it was like those
Were
long
girls easier to
conversations.
talk to?
It was that, right?
Yeah.
Like I felt like they could open up about things. I felt like I could be safer and open up about things. Whereas with my friends at the time, it was like, oh, we're gonna play basketball, like we're gonna play football, like we're
So
playing
you
these
didn't want to
sports.
do the things that they wanted to do, and also like doing something together without that connection was not filling what it was that you needed at that moment.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I didn't know how to name like loneliness at the
Right.
time, but I'm like, I want like affection. And I felt like in in what the home environment was, I didn't necessarily have that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like my mother, beautiful woman, amazing person, and like, is great at fulfilling like the physical needs that I had. And, some of the emotional ones were just like not met, right? Part of that is like language, right? Like Spanish is my first language, but it's not my like language of like emotional communication. And so I think I like was craving that and needed that and found myself like talking to girls about those things that were like feelings oriented.
So I think one of the things that I've been reflecting on, right, and you might sort of see this as well, is that if the desired state of the world that we want is
Nice.
is a state where men and women can both give and receive
Yeah.
emotionally, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
and that there are the barriers for men are different than the barriers for women. And so I think you named loneliness is something that I think is pervasive among young men and boys for sure,
Yeah.
and probably older men and boys too. We also know that social connections keep us emotionally, mentally, and physically healthy. There's so much research and data that shows that. And in order, like, but do we have a definition of like what a friendship or social connection actually even looks like? And so, if so, how do you find that? And so, I think it's what I have observed is that oftentimes it is men that are talking to women about their feelings,
Hmm. Yeah.
and not necessarily, and they want that,
Yeah.
but they're still not talking about it with each other. And so that's why I'm really kind of just curious how. So you started out having many female friends.
Yes. Yes.
Who was your first kind of like intimate male friend?
That's a good question. I think I don't think it was until like becoming an adult and like navigating divorce where I like had to deal
So
with
this guy is your first intimate male friend?
No, no, no.
Okay.
I like other friends, but I
Yeah.
don't think I navigated or like had to think about or like talk to my guy friends about feelings in a lot of ways. Like I think there was just things happening in my life where I'm like, oh, I'm like really emotional as someone who, hadn't really done therapy. And therapy, I feel like gave me a language to talk about
When
some of
did you
these
start
things.
doing therapy?
About 3 years ago.
Okay, so talking about feelings is generally new.
Generally new.
So it's like you had some early experiences
Yep.
as an 11-year-old
Yes.
where you had you're like, wow, this talking to girls is different than talking to
Yeah.
boys. You didn't really have a language of like why it was different, but you just liked it better. And now you're thinking like maybe it was because I was able to talk about more emotional things
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
feel safer in those conversations. So now is your therapist male or female?
Female.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. My therapist is a Black woman, beautiful person. I
Mhm.
think, she's helped me navigate like, the decision to even like leave the marriage, right? And, gave me language to talk about my feelings. I think like I had this before I started therapy, it was like my head and my heart were two different things, right? I was always like a happy-go-lucky person, but didn't know when I was like feeling in a funk, like what was
Mm.
actually happening. There was no like connection of those thoughts. And so, I'm navigating therapy, I'm navigating divorce, I'm navigating like, other dating relationships, loss of coworkers, different things. And, I found myself sad and I'm, talking like little by little, sort of like testing out in my friendships, like, hey, like this thing happened, like this is what happened, explaining the thing. And then I think as I've continued therapy, I started to get language
Yep.
around, I'm actually feeling lonely, or
Right.
like this is really hard. I am sad, which is not easy
Right.
to say.
No, it's not easy to say. And how has that been received by some? Because it's, I think sometimes you have a male friendship can be defined as like somebody that I like doing something with.
Yeah.
And then sometimes those friendships can turn into a place where you can
Yeah.
hold space for feelings. And I'm curious whether you've seen any evolution, sort of like since you've been coming in a more open and vulnerable place, have any of your existing friendships shifted?
Yeah, yeah, I'd say they have. So, a friend was prior to me like deciding to leave the marriage, like had navigated something similar. And I think him opening up one day, he calls me and it's like, hey, like I'm going through this thing. I think I'm gonna get a divorce. This happened, we're selling our home. And it was one of the first times where I'm like, oh, like you're opening up to me about emotions. And it sort of like started to give me an idea of like permission to also do
Yeah.
some of the same things. And so, as I was navigating like separating, I'm like, hey, this is happening. And like, I think I'm ready to like leave and move out and, navigate this. And so it's like these little moments where like we build a little bit more trust and build a little more trust. And so, now with some of those friendships, I can be really honest, like, hey, I'm like, feeling really lonely or like I'm feeling sad and I'm finding myself, wanting to reach out to people that I probably shouldn't be talking to right now
Yeah.
in a romantic way,
Right.
because I just feel sad or feel lonely.
Right. Right.
And so, yeah, it's like little moments, like little benchmarks, like, oh, I can actually open up a little bit about this, right? Because I think there was a level of like being scared, like you can't
Yeah.
really open up about these things.
Right. Well, I think it's then I know at least, for me is then it's also figuring out how you calibrate that too, because sometimes it's enough to just be able to have a tiny bit of space. It's like if you've got big feelings inside, it's like to sort of, you have to like let out the steam a little bit,
Yeah, yeah.
which is different than a therapeutic relationship where you're kind of diving very deep. And I think one thing that at least for me that I've thought about or reflected on sometimes in female friendships is that the dynamic is almost reversed, or I'm like, can we stop talking about feelings now and like
Interesting.
go do something
Yeah, yeah.
instead? Because like I don't want to sit here all day and talk about my sadness.
That's
I
good.
want to
That's
go work out. And so which
going to
is
run.
right, which is like less socially acceptable if you're a female, right? Whereas, I think for men is like men are kind of looking for more spaces to open up and I'm looking for like more spaces to compartmentalize
Yeah.
and like go, lift a barbell or something,
Yeah.
right? And so
Love it.
it's like how do you find that right
Yeah.
balance in sometimes we just have to live our lives and like not take our feelings so seriously, but like don't stuff them all inside to the point that they are going to give you a heart attack, because that's also not
That's
good.
not good. We
Right.
don't want to do that.
No,
We don't want
definitely don't want to do that. But I think it's like some of those conversations. So I think one thing that you talked about, which was that kind of like testing the waters, or that sort of first opening the door
Yeah.
disclosure of a feeling, is something that we had also touched on in the context of sharing more deeply personal and potentially traumatic types of things.
Yeah.
And so, I think one of the things that we talk about in the uncomfortable conversation a lot is just being, sort of being somebody who is prepared to receive a story of sexual violence or abuse, which is similar to I feel sad, but also a little bit bigger. And I think particularly in roles as adults is, sometimes if we work in education or if we work in a position where there's some requirements around that. But you had sort of shared a story, is there a time that you can remember the sort of first time that somebody disclosed something that was traumatic to you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember I was about 12, maybe 13, and I was on one of those phone calls on my free nights and weekends. And I was talking to the person, and they disclosed being molested by their uncle, and
Mm.
I remember the person was very clear about like I don't want to tell anyone, I don't want to talk to anyone, and I was angry, right? Like I was sad. I was like, wait, how can this be, right? And she didn't want me to tell anyone, and I remember I didn't, right? It's something I held on to, and it's like a very particular moment that I don't forget.
Right. So you were 11 or 12?
Yeah.
Like,
About
so
that
that's
age.
middle school.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was like
which is
7th grade.
it's my, like, that is a heavy thing to hold
Yeah.
for somebody,
Yeah.
and so I think you think about it both from the perspective. I mean, I was about the same age when I disclosed also. I mean, I disclosed both to my parents. I was a little older when I started telling my friends, but I think about that now from the lens of my friends, right? So for me, it's like I just didn't want to keep a secret anymore.
Yeah.
And there was something about being able to share that with somebody and to not be judged that was really meaningful and important. But similarly, as I had a friend in high school who disclosed to me that she was similar, being
Yeah.
molested and abused by an uncle, and it was that feeling of helplessness. Like, I'm just like, I'm hearing this and I can at least believe you,
Right.
which plays a role in that person's healing journey. But you have so little power when you are a little tween.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you think you're a big person.
Yes.
but you're not. And so kind of as you think about that, like, if with your adult lens,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
what would you have wished could have happened in that disclosure, whether it was with you or with somebody else? Like, what do you think would have been helpful to your friend
Yeah.
at that time? Was she still safe? Was it ongoing, or had it stopped?
It was like a family member in a previous state that they lived in, and now we were in a new state. We were in Florida at the time. Is where I went to middle school. And I wish
So she wasn't in active
she was not
danger.
actively,
Yeah.
no. But I kind of wish I would have at least told an adult, or like encouraged them to tell an adult who
Yeah.
could maybe report it.
Right.
As a younger person. But given it was another state, I was like, I don't actually know how we navigate this.
Do you remember what you said to her when she told you?
I don't really. I just remember the feeling of like being like angry and sad and like I want to help you, but I don't
Right.
know how to help
But
you.
you don't know how to help you.
Yeah,
And so today you work in education.
I do.
And so we sort of talked about so if somebody shared that story with you today,
Yeah,
you would have an obligation
I would.
to do something about
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And so kind of like do you know what that looks like? If somebody who you would have to call?
yeah. So I mean, in a situation like that, and again, I haven't worked at the school side in a while, where like I work specific like with students in this way, but you're gonna report to DCF, right? Like it is very, very serious. Like first thing you learn as a teacher, you are a mandated reporter. So when kids share things, kids be like, oh, like I have this thing, and I'll let kids know. It's like, hey, like whatever you tell me, like I'm a mandated reporter. Like I will, share when it makes sense, right? And so I haven't had that situation as an educator, as someone who works in the space, but like, yeah, if something happens or we hear about something happening, it's like
You would have to file a report
we'll have to
with
file a
with
report.
the government agency.
Yes.
And so I'm curious sort of, what your adult perspective is on whether those government agencies are helpful in.
Ooh, do I want to say this on a podcast?
Well, I mean, I will say it. So it's like it's a mixed bag, right? So it's like
bag.
it depends, and government, sort of a DCF is not always empowered to sort of do like they have limited tools and resources as well, right?
Yeah.
And so my point in all of
We
this,
thought
right?
many a time at the school level, and we're like, what actually happened? But
Right.
yeah.
Well, I think my point in all of this is I think it's like whether we're 11 or 4011.
Yeah, I'm not that one.
I'm not 4011 yet either. Maybe 3011.
Okay.
But I think what we wish could happen would be that like a magic superhero would fly in and make it all right for that
Perfect.
person.
I would love that.
Like that,
We could do
that
that
it's like, right, exactly. That we're going to just be like, hey, God, can you like come down here and just like fix this bad thing that happened? And so like, that's obviously like what we all hopefully feel in our hearts, right? And then the reality is that the pathways to justice and accountability and healing are much more complicated. And so I had promised that I was going to give you a framework for how to think about disclosures. And it's funny because you actually did most of this when you were intuitively when you were almost a teenager. But it's first like the acronym is SEEK. So the S is safety, And it's about how do you establish, so is this an imminent danger or threat, right? And so that kind of informs, that would, if you were to sort of like in an adult conversation, it's like, is this happening right now? Like how you would respond in the moment would be different. It's like if it's happening right now, or if it was something that happened a year ago or 6 months ago, sort of, is this person going to go home tonight and be in danger or not? So that's kind of like it's like a triage sort of question. Like, what am I dealing with here? And if it's not physical safety, it's kind of like, somebody might be telling you something. I mean, and even in an educational environment, but like they've already told 6 other people, and, all of the appropriate agencies are informed, and they're just kind of like bringing you along on something, versus like you don't always know if somebody tells you whether or not it's the first disclosure or like the 18th disclosure. And so sort of like being aware, so is this person physically safe? Is this person psychologically and emotionally safe? Sort of like, what are the other kind of players that are involved in keeping this person safe? And do I have any awareness of who those are? So that's kind of like the establish safety. And also like establishing safety in the conversation. So it's like, thank you for telling me that. Like, I'm really, I think it's great that you were brave enough to share that information with me, whether it's the first time or the 100th time. Like, I know that it's not easy. I mean, you said yourself, like sharing that I'm sad sometimes feels like a big, so it's like just really like acknowledging that like you did a brave thing, and I am like going to make that a safe experience for you. Right. And so I think that's number one. And then the second is empathy. So sort of just expressing empathy. And sometimes people are sharing and they feel sad. Sometimes they're sharing and they're like, I don't want to talk about it anymore. Again, it's like the whatever they're feeling is right. It's simply to just be like, whatever you feel right now makes sense. Like, it makes sense to me that you would want to just like leave this conversation and never talk about it again. Like, even if they can't, but it's, it's to express, find a way to verbally express empathy. And it sounds like that's something that comes naturally to you, and that you're building more skills as you're working through your own emotional language. And then the second E is about empowerment. And so this is the one where it is tricky when you are in a mandated reporter, because you know what you have to do. So it's like, so I am going to need to tell somebody about this. Would you like to know what I'm going to say? Would you like to know? So there's ways that you can give people choices within, we all have constraints on our lives. So it's like, how do you give people choices in that moment? And the best way to do that is what you were talking about, is making sure that before they shared it with you, they knew that you were a mandated reporter, because it's feeling that surprise constraint in the moment is different, but you can still navigate it. It's like, I'm sorry that this is a surprise to you. I wish we had had a chance to sort of talk about it earlier, and I am going to have to do this. But we have some choices about how it gets done. So it's like, we could go together to file this report. It's like when I'm dealing with if I'm dealing with a situation in an adult harassment scenario, where it's like, I could say, you can go to HR and I will check in tomorrow to see if that has happened. Or I can go, it's like, you can go first and I can go second, or I can go first and you can go second, or so there's like lots of different ways that you can kind of offer people. And then the last is the K is knowledge. And so it's having the knowledge about what that process looks like ahead of time really helps you in that moment. And so, and to the extent that you have previewed that. So it's like, if I'm talking about a workplace sexual harassment, it's if they knew that I have to mandate a report, if they understand what an HR investigation looks like, it's, so what that means is I'm going to need to share this with HR. That's an HR process. If there is something, if you feel like you need something personal, here is our EAP service. And so being able to, knowing what the ecosystem looks like. So it's like knowing that your mandated reporting is actually not going to solve all of the problems is like, that's just a helpful perspective to have. So it's like, I'm going to have to do this. Additionally, would you like me to walk you to the school counselor right now? It's like, would you, it's like, do you have a friend that you can call in this moment, right? It's like to know sort of like what you're doing and what you're not doing. So that's the SEEK framework.
Love it.
So which I think is just, it's so important. And I think so few mandated reporters get trained on it. And that it's just like what you said is like, you're told I'm a mandated reporter. And then you end up in that moment and you're like, great. Like, I think I might've just like really messed up someone's life. Like, cause sometimes they're like, I don't want, like, you're going to make me less safe if you tell somebody, and like, you still have to do it. And those things are real. And so, so until we get that kind of like direct line,
working on it,
to the superhero who can come and fix everything.
That's it. Solve everything.
Yeah. But I think about that. I mean, I think it's, when you think about you're the dad of a 3-year-old is, kind of like are there conversations that you've had with him already that you sort of feel like are kind of helping him to prepare to navigate, to sort of be the one
Yeah.
that can receive those calls and to be a safe space for the friends in his life? How do you think about that?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's two things. I think on in one sense, it's like you're at the playground and someone pushes you, like, yeah, you can tell me, and also like I want you to use your words, like say you don't like that, right?
Yeah.
And so he might come up to me and be like, oh, they did this. I was like, okay, use your words, like tell them I don't
Yeah.
like that, right? And we have a lot of like play dates and friends, and
Mm-hmm.
with adults and with kids. I'm like, hey, like, do you want a high five or a hug?
Yep.
Like, and
Those
so
are
being
great
able
ones.
to, like, use that language, and like sometimes he wants a high five. Sometimes he doesn't want any physical contact.
Right.
Okay, like
That's
that is
fine.
okay.
Normalizing. Yep.
Great. We're just gonna say bye. Bye, everyone. And so I want him to be able to know that he can do that and make those choices. So like in little ways, we're doing that now
Mm-hmm.
at age 3.
Oh, I love that. I'm a huge fan of the feelings wheels, right? So like
Okay.
there's a
Not
whole
introduced that yet.
yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different toys and games you can get. I mean, even just getting the magnets that are all of the emojis.
Okay.
And so then you have those on you. So then you can, because sometimes there's you might have a go-to feel like I'm most comfortable being angry or I'm most comfortable being anxious. But figuring out how to have a broad feelings vocabulary
Yeah.
is really helpful. And then it kind of helps you, like what you were saying is not being able to define loneliness
Yeah.
didn't give you as many tools to address it. And so it's like, so the feelings wheels, emoji,
Might make one for
magnets,
myself, actually. I'm like, wait, hold on.
they're
I
very
just
helpful.
put it at my desk.
Well, and I had a kid who didn't really like to talk about the feelings, but would point to what they were feeling.
Yeah.
Like there's lots of different kinds of anger. There's lots of different, there's frustrated, there's jealous, there's resentful, there's
Yeah.
overwhelmed. It's like, so how you sort of,
Yeah.
nuances and all of that.
No, we had a social worker. We used to meet at the school site, and before every meeting, we'd like describe what our emotion is right now. So we'd like look through the different like
Oh,
the
that's
smiley
great.
faces and the
Yeah.
different like I feel blank, and she like made sure we connected with some kind of emotion.
That's
Talked about
great.
students and
Yeah. You can't manage it unless you know what it is.
yeah.
So, so I love that. So I know, so one of the other things we talked about sort of in your post divorce, you have re-entered the dating world, which I know has been, which was not an experience that you really had because you married your college, the
Person. Yeah.
college person. And so you've sort of now entered the dating world and you had sort of shared a story about going out on a date with somebody and kind of coming back and just having some kind of awkward late night conversation and physical interaction that sort of left sounds like both of you kind of feeling like, what was that?
Yeah.
And so I think just, we can go into some of the details or not, but because I'm more curious just about how you've thought about that experience and how that's informed additional dates or sort of, kind of, because again, I think it's like you sort of had a run in where you're like, ooh, this like consent language is trickier than I thought it might be.
Yes.
And how might I approach that differently next time? So I'm curious if you've had any reflections since we talked. And
Yeah. No, it was definitely a moment where I was like, oh, like it's the question of consent and getting a yes or no, and there's also like thinking about the sort of environment and conversations that lead up to moments of intimacy and things like that. And so, it was just like this weird thing for me to, engage with someone. And, we talked the next morning, and she's like, oh, like what happened? Like, I don't know. I'm like, oh, okay. And so the person was like so apologetic, and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry that I acted that way. Like, blah, like for 2 days straight. And I'm like, okay, like, don't worry. Like, I don't actually want to, like, I don't want to pursue this any further, but like, no harm, no foul. Like, let's just move on. And then I get a call about a week and a half later. She's like texting me like, hey, can we like talk on the phone? And I'm like, I don't know what you want to talk about. Like, I like thought I made it clear, like, I just don't want to pursue this. Like, I'm not interested. And so she calls, and I'm like on my way to a parade, and is like, hey, like, actually, like, I feel like, I was the one that was taken advantage of. And I'm like, oh, but like I asked, like it was this moment where it's like, yes, consent is a question, and the person says yes, and also like, what are the conversations I'm having before that
How
moment?
well do I know
How,
this person, and
how
how
well
they
do I know that?
communicate,
Yes.
and how do they communicate their boundaries, and what do they do when they are intoxicated or not
Yeah.
intoxicated?
And like I didn't know any of
Yep.
those things, and
Right.
what sort of environments am I allowing myself to be in? And I think that was the big like flag for me. Like, oh, like no one comes to my house. Like it's just like, if I don't know you, like this is probably not the right
Right.
rule.
Right. So it sounds like one takeaway was for you was, let me think about the converse. How much do I need to know
Yeah.
somebody before I
Yeah.
cross a physically intimate line with them?
Yeah.
Because a lot of is at stake when that happens,
Hmm.
right? And that it's like, if that communication doesn't go well,
Yeah.
then that has an impact on
Yeah.
people for many different reasons, right? It's like, for some people it might be like, well, I wouldn't do that again. And for other people, it's like that felt really upsetting and traumatic, and, like felt like and you don't even know what that person's
Yeah.
history is
Yeah.
until after the fact. So has that changed the way that you approach first or second dates now, or has it scared you off to some things, or?
I feel like I'm a little on the scared off. Like I haven't really done a whole lot of dating since.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for me, I'm asking more questions, and I'm
Mm.
like sussing people out a little more, and I'm checking references and like, do you know this person?
Yeah.
What do you know about this person? What do you think about this person in this way?
Interesting. Yeah.
Um, and so I guess I'm just more cautious, I
Well, it's
think.
hard to trust yourself and to figure out how you build trust with somebody, right? Is that, there's a certain level of trust that is required for physical intimacy to be safe, right?
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
like, if that's what you want to do, it's, and trust is a leap of faith.
it is. It is.
So,
It is that.
so sort of like, where is that line, and what does those communications? I think we always, when I teach consent, it's, the way we teach it is it's not the absence of no, but the presence of yes.
Mm,
And so to really be able to kind of like understand what somebody's yes is, and sort of like, oh, yeah, and you have to know them, right?
yeah.
And or the other way that we talk about it is that consent is a language.
Mm,
And when you first meet somebody, is like, if you don't know what, like, you might think you're speaking the same language, but if you're not speaking exactly the same dialects, and like suddenly you're kind of like, oh, like you really misinterpreted something that I was saying there. And so being confident that you're speaking the same language,
yeah.
is an important one. But it's like, I think this is something where, again, it's like, it starts with hug or a high five, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what we learn on the playground.
And I model it too now. I'm like,
Right.
is a hug okay? Like I'm usually like, I've always been like a hugger, but I'm like, wait, no, like
Right.
we'll hug or high five.
Yeah.
Just whatever works for you.
And you had mentioned this briefly, and we had also talked about it a little bit more deeply, but it's, sort of, I think the way you've described it is, Kev, you grew up it was a loving family, and it was also not a family that sort of like talked about a lot of these
Yeah.
types of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you also had a faith environment and went to a faith-based school
Yeah.
where these sort of things were also not talked about. And so I'm curious, just kind of diving in on the faith side too, is like, if you could wave a magic wand,
Okay.
and, what could that faith environment have looked like that would have prepared you better for not just, the dating, but also
Yeah.
male friendship, or how you could support somebody that was being molested by their uncle? Like,
Yeah.
kind of, what is there a role that you think your faith environment could have played? And if so, like, what would that have looked like?
Yeah. 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 I'd say like faith environment, there are good things, right? There's like the community building and like the care for people. I think for me, the magic wand would create space for gray and dialogue, gray and conversation, right? It's an upbringing that like you're either saved or unsaved. If there's heaven, there's hell. There's like
Mm.
life, there's death, right? Everything felt so black and white, and I wasn't introduced to other sort of schools of thought into like some courses in undergrad where it was like, oh,
Grace
like
exists.
grace exists, and also like even like religious thought included space for like commentary on the Torah, like commentary on commentary, and like there was actually different ways of viewing things. And I think the faith upbringing was like, no, this is like, there's one way of viewing this thing, and this text means this one thing, and there's a lot of people that are thinking that their perspective is the right perspective. And I think that magic wand would leave space for gray, and sort of being able to like critique and analyze and assess and make sense of the thing, as opposed to just feeling like things were black and white.
So it's like how you, um I'm Christian, and I think one of the things that I value about my church is just the sort of the pull into the real life, right? Is that
Yeah.
it's like, these are concept, like we can agree on the concept, but we might not agree on how it sort of shows up in real life.
Yeah.
But like that's where the work is,
Yeah.
right? Is like that's where the work is. And it's like if we're all trying to understand that in a way that kind of leads us to be better humans and to kind of, live the principles that we believe we ought to be living and that we might pretty much agree on. It's like, how does that play out? Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I think I've been more curious about the role that faith communities and faith
Mm-hmm.
environments can play in some of these conversations, because I think that when you experience sexual abuse or violence and that something is so broken inside of you that it's like there has to be a role for God in how you make sense of that. And then we have to have different ways of talking about it as a culture. So, well, thank you for being here today. It's really a pleasure to engage in this conversation. I hope we can continue. I'm excited to hear. Maybe we can come back and revisit how things are going.
Would love that.
Which would be really great. So, and hopefully, all of you picked something up that you can talk about with somebody else in your life. That is the point of this work, is to not just listen to conversations, but to engage in them yourself. That's how you feel uncomfortable and get better at feeling uncomfortable around the most important things. So thank you for being here on the Uncomfortable Conversation podcast. If you liked what you heard, please also like us and follow us on YouTube and Instagram.